podcast. Tonight is 7 ways why I rose to experience being a student of now. I rose to experience being a student of now because the past can only teach repetition. And the museum of the past is repetition, egotistical snapshots, soul tattoos, but the now teaches revelations. The museum mind wants me touring relics, but I rise into the immediacy where perception replaces memory and breath becomes the universe's curriculum. I choose the now because it is the only place where I exist, unborrowed, unstoried, and unrepeatable. I study the now because it is the only scholar that doesn't lie. The only truth archives never archives, and the only frequency that dissolves every identity. I never choose. I rise because the moment awakens to now. I stop being the character in the exhibit and become the perceptor who authors nowality in here and now veracity. The difference between the student of indoctrinated education and a student of the now is the student of indoctrination memorizes. Student of the now perceives with perceptor prowess. The indoctrinated student repeats archived theories, inherited frameworks, and pre-approved conclusions. They tour the museum. The student of now meets life directly, without filters, without scripts, and without the mind's dusty exhibits. Perception replaces repetition. The student of indoctrination performs identity. Student of now dissolves identity. Indoctrinated education trains the performer, the obedient one, then the compliant one, the one that is shaped by past interpretations. The student of now awakens the perceptor prowess, the one who sees without the museum's frames. Identity becomes optional, never mandatory. Student of indoctrination obeys the past. Student of now authors the present. Indoctrinated learning preserves yesterday's logic. It rewards conformity to old conclusions. The student of now sources clarity from immediacy, breath, and presence. They don't inherit reality, they innovate it. Why being an indoctrinated student keeps you living in the museum of ancestor programming. And see, the world is actually a museum. We just live in the artifacts and the artifallacies of what repetition is. Indoctrinated learning recycles ancestral conclusions. Indoctrinated education never teaches perception, it teaches inheritance. You're trained to repeat the same beliefs, fears, frameworks, and interpretations your ancestors used to survive. How do we use their ancestor programming to survive today without us realizing it? You're never learning, you're reenacting. The museum stays alive because you keep reciting the plaques. Indoctrinated identity keeps you performing from the past. I witnessed that in my life, but when I opened up to the life as a museum, I started rising out of the everything. Indoctrination builds a character. The obedient student, the compliant thinker, is the one who trusts authority over awareness. The character is stitched from ancestral survival patterns. As long as you perform that identity, you live inside their nervous system, never your own. How do we inherit our today's thinking from other people's nervous systems? That's something I've witnessed in my life, and I've really awakened. If I listen to the now, I naturally open the wanderer's curiosity within me. Indoctrinated thinking blocks perception and preserves relics. Indoctrination trains the mind to analyze memory. Train Indoctrination trains the mind to analyze, memorize, and obey all museum behaviors. And that's something that when you walk through the museum, you're following the rules of the museum, and the museum is your outside world. None of it requires presence, none of it requires the now authenticity. This keeps old wounds, old fears, and old narrative preserved behind the glass, untouched and still controlling you. Where do you see that in your life? I see it a lot in the physical world. And when I see it in the physical world, the one I have to do the introspection on is me. Why a student of now naturally opens wandering, colorful curiosity. Now learning removes the museum walls. The student of now isn't confined to archived knowledge, inherited beliefs, or pre-approved interpretations. With, with zero walls, zero plaques, and zero correct answers, curiosity becomes wild and open to the world. As the freedom flows, as you go of natural optimistic wisdom. And yes, I did forget these. As curiosity becomes wild, wandering, and multi-dimensional, the moment you stop studying the past, the world stops being a hallway and becomes a horizon. Where do you see that in school? The school system is a hallway, never the horizon. Presence turns perception into color. Indoctrinated learning is a grayscale. Memorize, repeat, obey. Where do you see that? Now learning is a full spectrum. Sense, feel, perceive, and unleash the perceptor. Those it just. When you meet reality without filters, everything becomes vivid. Textures, nuances, energies, possibilities. As curiosity blooms, you zoom through life with the greatest of ease because the moment is alive, never archived. The student of now follows wander, never rules. Indoctrination trains you to seek answers, now opens the pathways of enlightenment for you to seek liberation and awareness. Answers and exploration, awareness expands it. The student of now moves by instinct, intuition, and inner color, never by curriculum. Curiosity becomes sovereign, propelling, because nothing is predetermined and everything is discoverable. Why a student of now dissolves ancestor-anchored programming. Now comprehension interprets inherited reflex loops. Ancestor programming survives through automatic reactions. Fear, obedience, hesitation, and self-doubt. The student of now never runs those loops. They witness them as they arise and dissolve them as they flow. That moment of perception breaks the reflex. Awareness replaces inheritance. The nervous system stops reenacting the past because the present is finally being perceived. Now presence dissolves the identity, the ancestor programming. Ancestor programming needs a character to inhabit. The good child, the obedient student, the survival mode self, the student of now stands outside that identity. When you stop performing the inherited character, the ancestral code has nowhere to run or operate. The program collapses because the performer is gone. Now curiosity overrides ancestral certainty. Ancestors survive by clinging to certainty, rules, beliefs, warnings, and limitations. The student of now moves by curiosity, never by caution. Curiosity opens the now narrow pathways, as certainty locks you in old narrow ways. The moment you choose wonder over warning, the ancestral grid loses its authority and dissolves instantly. Why rewire, redo, and rekeep and redo, anything? You're locked in the museum of the past. Anything assumes the past is the authority. The moment you rewire, redo, or revisit, you've already bowing to yesterday as the source of truth. You're never creating, you're correcting. You're never perceiving, you're repairing. This keeps you orbiting in the same relics, the same wounds, and the same ancestral scripts. Is maintenance, now is liberation. Reactions recycle the same nervous system loops. Every is a loop. Rethink, refeel, reinterpret, reprocess. These loops run on inherited wiring, never sovereign perception, unleashing your perceptor prowess to wow the world. When you reactivate the same neural pathways your ancestors survived with, you're never evolving, you're rehearsing. The museum stays alive because you keep walking the same hallway. Refocus keeps you fixing the character instead of dissolving it. Anything assumes the character is real and needs improvement. But the character is the museum piece, the archived identity built from memory. Memory is the museum. Your mind is a museum of yesterday's relics and a lot of artifallacies. Fixing it keeps it alive. The student of now never reshapes anything. Never reshapes the character. They outgrow it and liberate from it. Liberation happens when you stop repairing the exhibit and step out of the building into the fresh air of dare. Why now wire, now do, now anything illuminates your pathways of now. Now action illuminates pathways that never existed in the past. When you act from now, you're never repairing old wiring. You're creating now circuitry the ancestors never had access to. Now wiring is a generator, never corrective. It lights up neural pathways that memory cannot predict, control, or limit. The moment you move from now, the past loses its blueprint and loses its blueprint over your behavior. Now doing bypasses inherited programming entirely. Redoing keeps you inside the ancestral loops. Now doing exits the loop altogether. As you do from presence, never pattern, the nervous system stops reenacting survival codes and starts responding to reality. Now doing is sovereign movement. It illuminates pathways untouched by lineage, trauma, drama, or social conditioning. Now anything activates perception, never preservation. The past preserves, the now perceives. When you choose now anything, now speak, now move, now sense. You ignite awareness instead of memory. Awareness is illumination. It reveals options, colors, and directions, and insights that museum minds can never show you. The pathway of now appears only when you walk them, as you stroll down them and chauffeured out into the liberation of life. Why the student of now hearkens fresh neural pathways of liberation. Now awareness destroys the neural loyalty to the past. The student of now refuses to bow to yesterday's wiring. The moment you perceive instead of remember, the brain stops saluting ancestral commands. Neural loyalty shifts from survival history to sovereign presence. Liberation begins as the nervous system stops asking the past for permission. Liberation begins as the instant the nervous system stops asking the past for permission. Now perception forces the brain to innovate, never imitate. Indoctrinated minds imitate. Now images innovate. When you meet reality without filters, the brain instantly builds fresh pathways on the spot. No script, no archive, no inherited reflex can guide you. This forced innovation is ruthless liberation. The nervous system becomes a creator, not a curator. Now frequencies collapse the architecture that trauma built. Trauma builds trails of anticipation, avoidance, and hypervigilance. Now frequencies erases the future fear, past pain that fuel those circuits. When you stand in pure presence, the architecture of trauma has zero to attach to. The pathways collapse because the conditions that built them no longer exist. Why the liberated now destroys the museum of the past and clears your skies of whys. Now liberation collapses architecture of memory and identity. The liberated now never negotiates with the past. It makes it irrelevant. So as you stand in pure presence, the identity built from wounds, roles, and ancestral scripts has zero oxygen to breathe. The museum collapses because the character was built to preserve your past no longer exists. Your inner sky is clear because nothing old is left to cast the shadow. The now frequencies burns the relics before they can speak. The past survives by replaying its old stories. The liberated now interprets the replay before it begins and opens up a fresh pathway of enlightenment. Presence is a flame. It incinerates assumptions, dissolves inherited reflexes, and silences the museum's narrators. What remains is unclouded perception, sky-wide, wise horizons opened, unstoried awareness. Now truth replaces inherited knowledge with live clarity. Ancestor knowledge is often just ancestor fear dressed as guidance. The liberated now clears that fog. It reveals what is actually true, not what was once necessary for survival. How is a lot of stuff that comes out of our mind necessary for survival to keep us in our comfort zone programming? Your sky's clear because you stop flying with borrowed wings and start navigating with direct perception and and a proprietary cleverness. And its clarity sourced from now, never nostalgia. While education books and educated books are museum of the past, controlling your thinking, knowing today. Books freeze yesterday's conclusions as today's truth. Because truth is a mindset, and it doesn't always have have it in here and now. Education books never teach perception; they teach preservation. They lock in old frameworks, outdated interpretation, and inherited beliefs as if they are a universal truth. So when you study an educated book, you're never learning, you're absorbing archived conclusions from other people. Your thinking becomes a replica of someone else's yesterday. Your thinking, when you read an archived book, their conclusions, your thinking becomes a replica of someone else's yesterday. So, how's education someone else's yesterday? Books train your mind to obey authority instead of awareness. The moment you accept a book as the source, you surrender your direct perception. You stop seeing and start believing. This keeps your knowing anchored to the author's worldwide institutions, institutional agenda and cultural condition. The museum controls you because you trust its plaques more than your own eyes. Books reinforce memory logic blocking the now and wisdom. Education books operate through memorization, repetition, and conceptual recycling. All past best mechanism, this trains the brain to think from memory instead of from presence. When memory becomes the master, the now becomes invisible. Your intelligence gets trapped in archived knowledge instead of liberated awareness. Why education is never learning, just absorbed archived conclusions. Education replaces perception with pre approved conclusions. Indoctrinated education never teaches you to see, it teaches you to accept. You're handed interpretations frozen in time and told they are truth. This is never learning, it's downloading. Your awareness gets overwritten by someone else's yesterday. Education trains the mind to memorize, never realize. Memorization is a museum's favorite tool. Keeps you repeating archived ideas instead of discovering fresh insight. Authentic awareness requires direct perception. As education demands recall, you become a storage unit, never a seer of your own life. Education binds your knowing to the past limitations. Every fact, theory, and framework in a textbook is a snapshot of someone's limited understanding at a specific moment in history. As you absorb it as truth, you inherit their ceiling. You stop evolving because you're thinking inside their expired boundaries. While listening, questioning, and inspirations dissolve, a student of today and enterprise your perceptor prowess. Listening annihilates the preloaded narrative of today. Authentic listening is never hearing, it's perceiving without the mind's commentary. When you listen from now, the indoctrinated student of today identity evaporates. You're no longer absorbing society's scripts. You're sensing reality directly. This direct perception activates perceptor prowess because Zilch stands between you and the moment. Questions shatter the obedience that today's student depends on. The student of today survives through compliance, accept, memorize, repeat. A single maverick question detonates that structure. Question expose assumptions, unravel inherited logic, and break the spell of prepackaged knowledge. The moment you question, you stop being a student of the system and become a sovereign explorer of now. Inspiration bypasses thoughts and ignites enterprising prowess. Inspiration never comes from memory. It comes from direct contact with the now. It bypasses thinking entirely and activates your enterprising perceptor's natural genius. Inspiration moves you from imitation to creation, from learning to generating, from being taught to being tuned in. This is where your prowess erupts as you no longer a student of today. You're the architect of your now. Why listening and questions energize your student of now and open your museum's doors for you to stroll through your here and now. Listening cracks the museum's glass of inherited meaning. Authentic listening is never hearing, it's perceiving without the mind's archived commentary. As you listen from now, the museum's glass cases break open, letting out, dissolving the beliefs, labels, and interpretations you inherited. And they all begin to fracture and feature your yesterday's cloning. You stop staring at relics and instantly sensing nowality. This energizes a student of now because perception replaces preservation. Questions unhinge the locked doors of yesterday's logic. The moment you question, you stop being a prisoner of the museum's plaques. Questions dissolve the authority of old conclusion, expose the cracks in every inherited certainty. The doors swing open because questions break the hinges of indoctrination. The student of now steps through with sovereign curiosity. Energized awareness turns a museum into a hallway, never a home. When listening and questioning activates your now awareness, the museum stops being a place you live and becomes a place you stroll through that chauffeurs you to your desired lifestyle. You walk through it with clarity instead of being trapped inside it with identity. The student of now never doesn't escape the museum. They outgrow it. They expand out of it, and the here and now becomes the only terrain that matters. Why the world today is stuck in a museum of the past. Inherited survival mindsets override present moment perceptions. Parents unconsciously pass down fear-based reflexes, scarcity logic, and emotional survival codes. These patterns were useful for their emergencies, never today's nowality. As the world keeps reenacting them, when survival programming becomes the operating system, humanity stops perceiving now and instantly And when survival mode program becomes the operating system, humanity stops perceiving now and instantly performs yesterday's dismay. The museum stays alive because everyone is still running ancestor firmware. Indoctrinated education trains obedience to archive conclusion. Schools never teach awareness, they teach compliance. Students memorize old frameworks, old theories, and old interpretations, that are all curated relics. This creates adults who think inside inherited boxes and defend outdated knowledge as truth. And the truth is a fallacy because it comes from mindset, and the mind is always from yesterday. The world stays stuck because education mass produces museums for tour guides instead of perceptors. PhD programming elevates past knowledge as unquestionable authority. The PhD mindset worships citation, tradition, and intellectual lineage. It rewards repeating what has already been concluded and punishes fresh perception. This turns the past into a deity and the present into a footnote. The world remains trapped because its experts are trained to preserve the museum, never exit it. Why am I the liberator of me? Energetic liberation, politically inspiration, autonomous expansion, outlaw optimism, revolutionary revelation destroys my museum of the past. Egotistic past destroy my museum, the past egotistical illusions and ancestor anchored programming, while I am the liberator of me destroys the museum of the past. Energetic liberation dissolves the ego's archived identity. Energetic liberation never fixes the ego, it exposes it. The moment you stand in raw presence, the ego's museum, self-built from wounds, roles, ancestor expectation, loses its authority, and you stop performing character, the past, programmed and claim your perceptor who sees without distortion. Liberation begins when the archive no longer defines you. Autonomous expansion breaks the chains of ancestor anchored programming. Autonomous expansion is a refusal to inherit limitations. It is the sovereign act of choosing perception over programming. When you expand from within, never from memory, the ancestral scripts collapse. You stop reacting from survival fears and start generating your own reality. Expansion destroys the museum because you stop living inside its walls. Outlaw optimism and revolutionary revelation shatter egotistical illusions. Outlaw optimism is never positivity, it's rebellion. It refuses the ego's catastrophes and the past predictions and the ancestors' warnings. Revolutionary revelations arise when you see through the illusions that you are a product of history. The clarity detonates the museum. Illusions unveils the authenticity. You're never the exhibit. You're always the liberator. And as you liberate you from you, you rise to your own defined way of life. Now, I want to thank you. I'm Robert A. Wilson with Cowboy Wisdom Podcast, and we'll be back here with Thursday, and I'm not sure what it's going to be, but it'll be entertaining. Thank you and good night.